The ballroom glittered with crystal light and quiet laughter, the kind that hid more than it revealed. Champagne flutes clinked between forced smiles, and conversations moved in careful circles around the people who mattered. In the far corner stood a woman in a deep navy dress, her arms folded against the chill of being unseen. Whispers passed her like wind around a stone. Then a tall, silent man in a charcoal suit set down his glass, crossed the polished floor, stopped in front of her, and extended his hand. The entire room turned, and everything changed. The Whitman Tower rose 42 floors above the river, and on the top floor, the annual gala of Whitman and Pierce Financial moved through its rituals like a well-rehearsed play. Every detail had been measured. The string quartet kept the music low enough for conversation. Waiters circled with practiced quietness, balancing trays of champagne and cold canapes. Beneath the chandeliers, senior partners stood in tight clusters, smiling at the right moments, laughing at the right jokes, and watching everyone who entered the room. Adrian Cole stood near one of the tall windows with a glass of water in his hand, listening more than speaking. At 38, he had been the firm's chief financial officer for 3 years, long enough to know exactly how rooms like this worked. The men around him discussed quarterly margins and a recent acquisition in Boston, but Adrian kept glancing toward the entrance, watching how the crowd parted and reformed every time someone new walked in. He had attended 6 of these galas. He had never enjoyed one. A colleague named Marcus Reed clapped him on the shoulder and made some remark about a policy proposal, but Adrian only nodded. He had a way of listening that gave the impression of full attention while his mind moved somewhere else entirely. People often described him as reserved. A few, less generously, called him cold. Neither label bothered him. He had learned, long before tonight, that silence was the cheapest form of safety. Across the ballroom, the elevator opened, and a woman stepped out alone. She wore a navy dress, simple and elegant, almost severe in its restraint. Her dark hair was pulled back in a way that suggested she had not spent long deciding how she wanted to appear tonight. She stopped at the threshold of the room, scanning faces. Adrian saw the exact moment she realized no one was waiting for her. Her shoulders shifted slightly, the small adjustment a body makes when it decides to keep walking anyway. Her name was Sophie Bennett. She had worked in the firm's marketing division for almost 6 years. Adrian had seen her in meetings before. He remembered her as steady, articulate, and intelligent, the kind of person who spoke last and usually said the most useful thing in the room. He also remembered hearing, through the quiet machinery of office gossip, that her divorce had been finalized earlier that autumn. The whisper had moved through the building quickly, and now, watching her enter the ballroom alone, Adrian could see that the whisper had arrived before her. Sophie made her way toward the bar, and Adrian noticed how people adjusted around her. A woman from her department, Megan Hart, half turned her back. A senior account director named Daniel Foster offered the briefest nod before returning to his conversation. 2 younger associates exchanged a glance Adrian could read from across the room. None of it was loud. None of it was openly cruel. It was the quieter cruelty of people choosing, very deliberately, not to see someone. Sophie ordered sparkling water, accepted it with a polite smile, and stepped toward an empty space along the wall. She did not check her phone. She did not pretend to study the cocktail menu. She simply stood there, her back almost touching the paneling, holding her glass with both hands as though it were the only object in the room she trusted. Adrian had grown used to the architecture of events like this, the invisible hierarchy that decided who was welcomed and who was quietly erased. But tonight, for reasons he could not immediately explain, it struck him differently. Something about Sophie's steadiness unsettled him. She was not shrinking, not pleading, not pretending not to notice. She was enduring it, and somehow that was worse. He recognized the posture. It belonged to someone who had learned to be alone without breaking. Adrian moved a few steps along the window, partly to keep her in sight and partly to escape Marcus, who had launched into a long story about his second house in Connecticut. As Marcus talked, Adrian watched the room continue its quiet work. Victoria Lang, the wife of one of the senior partners, glanced toward Sophie and leaned close to her companion behind a raised glass. The companion laughed softly. Sophie either heard it or sensed it. Her chin lifted by a fraction. She did not look over. She did not need to. What disturbed Adrian most was how ordinary it all was. No one was insulting her directly. No one was causing a scene. The exclusion was polished, smooth, impossible to accuse. If questioned, every person in that ballroom would claim innocence. They would say they had simply been distracted, caught in another conversation, too busy to notice. And every one of them would be lying without ever fully admitting it to themselves. Adrian set his water glass down. He thought about his own position in the firm, about the careful image he had built over more than a decade. Reliable, measured, professional. Not a man who created complications. Not a man who attached himself to controversy. Tonight had been supposed to follow the same pattern as every other gala. Stay for an hour, speak to the right people, leave before the music grew louder and the conversation sloppier. But when he looked back toward Sophie, he realized she had already finished half her drink. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, not searching for anyone anymore, only calculating how much longer she could endure being there. Adrian estimated she would leave within 15 minutes. He estimated, with the same cold precision he used in finance meetings, that almost no one would notice. The choice before him arrived with startling clarity. He could finish the evening exactly as planned, or he could cross the room and stand beside the one person everyone else had decided to ignore. The first option would cost him nothing. The second would cost him something he could not yet measure. He thought about his own life, about all the rooms he had entered where no one had been waiting for him, about all the years he had spent surviving by remaining careful. The gala had asked him a question, and standing there by the window, he realized he already knew his answer. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket and stepped away from the wall. Marcus said something behind him, perhaps a question, but Adrian did not turn around. He crossed the ballroom at an unhurried pace, the kind of pace a man uses when he does not want his decision to look emotional. He passed Daniel Foster, who glanced up with mild curiosity. He passed Victoria Lang, whose eyes sharpened with interest. He passed two younger associates who fell silent as he walked by. Sophie did not notice him at first. She was watching the quartet, or pretending to. When she sensed someone approaching, she straightened slightly, preparing herself for another polite dismissal. Then she looked up and saw who it was. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, caution, and beneath both of them, something more fragile. She hid almost immediately. Adrian stopped a respectful distance away. He did not offer the polished smile everyone else in the room wore like part of their formal attire. Instead, he simply met her eyes. "I don't think we've been properly introduced tonight," he said quietly. "Adrian Cole, finance." Sophie studied him carefully before answering. He could see her searching his expression for the familiar signs of pity or performance. She did not seem to find them. "Sophie Bennett," she said softly. "Marketing." "I know," Adrian replied. He let the words rest there without explanation. Around them, the room had already begun noticing. Conversations did not stop, but they shifted, like water adjusting around a stone. Adrian could feel ice settling onto his back. He had expected that. He looked at Sophie's careful grip on her glass, at the composure she had managed to keep despite an hour of calculated exclusion. Whatever happened next, he understood one thing clearly. This would not remain private. It would be seen, measured, remembered. The quartet shifted into a slower piece. Adrian heard the change and understood the moment had arrived sooner than he intended. "They've started the dance set," he said. "I'd like to ask you something, and I'd like you to feel free to say no." Sophie watched him silently. "Would you join me for one dance?" She did not answer immediately. Adrian could almost see the calculations moving behind her eyes. Kindness had become suspicious to her. That much was obvious. "Mr. Cole," she said quietly, "I don't think that's a good idea." "I'd like to hear why before I accept that," he replied. She set her glass down carefully. "Because half this room is waiting to see what I do tonight," she said. "And the other half is waiting to see what someone like you would do near someone like me." Adrian nodded once. "That's accurate," he admitted. "I thought about it." "And you're asking anyway?" "Yes." Across the ballroom, Victoria Lang leaned toward her husband and whispered something. Daniel Foster watched over the rim of his wine glass. Megan Hart had stopped moving altogether. Sophie noticed all of it. Adrian could see the old instinct rising in her, the instinct to disappear before the room could hurt her again. He had watched her resist that instinct all evening. Now he was asking her to resist it publicly. "If you walk out there with me," she said, "your name will be in conversations tomorrow morning." "I know. And mine will be in even more." "I know that too." She studied him for another moment. Then finally, slowly, She nodded. One song, she said. Adrian offered his hand. She took it, and the warmth of her palm was the first genuinely warm thing he had felt all evening. They walked together toward the dance floor. Neither hurried, neither apologizing. The polished floor reflected the chandeliers in long ribbons of gold light. A few couples were already dancing, mostly executives and their spouses. As Adrian and Sophie stepped into the open space, nearby couples drifted aside almost instinctively. Adrian turned toward her. One hand rested lightly near her waist. The other held hers carefully. I'm not very good at this, Sophie admitted quietly. Neither am I, Adrian said. We'll keep it simple. They began to move. The quartet played a slow waltz that demanded nothing dramatic, only steadiness. For a brief moment, the room disappeared. Then it returned all at once. Adrian could feel people watching. Sophie felt it too. They're staring, she murmured. Yes. You're going to regret this. Adrian considered the words. I thought about that, he said finally. I decided it wasn't a good enough reason. For the first time since stepping onto the floor, Sophie looked directly at him. Her eyes were tired. Not from the evening alone, but from years of carrying herself carefully through rooms that only valued her conditionally. Why are you doing this? She asked softly. Adrian thought about the honest answer. It was too large for a ballroom, too personal for a dance floor. So he chose the simplest truth. Because no one should stand against a wall for an hour pretending they don't notice they're being erased, he said. And because I noticed. Sophie said nothing, but her hand shifted slightly on his shoulder, as though she suddenly understood the weight of what he meant. Halfway through the song, Marcus Reed appeared at the edge of the dance floor holding a fresh glass of wine. He didn't interrupt. He simply waited to be seen. Adrian turned them subtly, so his back faced Marcus. Sophie noticed the movement. Your friend wants to talk. He'll wait. He won't be the only one. He still won't be the most important conversation in this room tonight. The music reached its final phrase. Adrian guided Sophie gently off the floor toward the quieter windows overlooking the river. Before they could fully escape the attention of the ballroom, Daniel Foster approached. Adrian, he said smoothly. James would like a quick word at the bar. I'll be there in a few minutes. He suggested now. And I'm suggesting a few minutes. Daniel's smile tightened before disappearing entirely. He nodded once and stepped away. Beside him, Sophie's posture changed. The armor returned. I should go, she said quietly. You don't have to. This is already becoming a problem for you. You're not the problem. You don't understand, she said. I've been through rooms like this before. By Monday, there will be a version of tonight that has nothing to do with reality. Adrian knew she was right. That was the worst part. He understood exactly how institutions rewrote stories to protect themselves. Stay, he said quietly. One more song. After that, if you want to leave, I'll walk you to the elevator myself. For a moment, he thought she might agree. Then she glanced toward the bar and saw James Whiteham watching from across the room. Something in her expression closed. I'm sorry, she whispered. Then she turned and walked toward the elevators. Adrian remained standing alone beside the dance floor. The quartet began another piece behind him. People watched. Marcus approached from one side, Daniel from the other. James Whiteham had turned fully toward him now. Adrian looked once toward the elevators where Sophie had disappeared. And in that moment, he realized something with complete certainty. Doing nothing would cost him more than doing something. So he walked. Not toward Marcus. Not toward Daniel. Not toward James Whiteham. Toward Sophie. Marcus called his name once, but Adrian ignored him. Daniel attempted to intercept him near the corridor. James is waiting, he said carefully. Then he can wait longer. Adrian left the ballroom behind. The hallway outside was quiet and gray, lit softly by recessed lights. At the far end near the elevators, Sophie stood with one hand against the wall, gathering herself before leaving. She heard his footsteps and turned. Adrian, please, she said. 1 minute, he replied. If after 1 minute you still want to go, I'll press the elevator button myself. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Sophie exhaled slowly. I was married for 9 years, she said. I attended every event like this as someone's wife. I knew exactly where to stand. Which conversations mattered. Which people mattered. Adrian listened silently. Then 6 months ago, I stopped being useful in the same way. And suddenly people forgot I existed. Her voice remained calm, but the calmness carried exhaustion beneath it. That's the worst part, she continued. Nobody actively hates me. They just decided I no longer belong. Adrian felt something tighten in his chest. So when you crossed that ballroom tonight, she said, I didn't think you were being kind. I thought you were being careless. When she finished, silence settled softly between them. Then Adrian spoke. I've spent most of my life surviving by being careful, he admitted. I know exactly how rooms like that work. I know the cost of standing beside the wrong person. He paused. And tonight, I realized I'm tired of paying for safety with silence. Sophie's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. What I saw tonight, Adrian continued, was not a problem, not a scandal, not a difficult woman. He looked directly at her. I saw someone being erased in real time while everyone around her pretended not to notice. The corridor remained still around them. A distant elevator chimed somewhere below. You don't know me, Sophie whispered. No, Adrian said. But I know what I watched for an hour. And I know I'm not willing to keep watching it. Something in her expression softened then. Not completely. Just enough. If you walk back in there with me, Adrian said carefully, it won't be because I feel sorry for you. It will be because none of them had the right to treat you that way. He hesitated briefly. And because someone should refuse to participate. Sophie looked past him toward the ballroom doors. Then finally, quietly, she nodded. One song, she said again. One song. They walked back together. And when they re-entered the ballroom, the atmosphere shifted almost physically. Conversations lowered. People watched openly now. Marcus stood near the bar with an expression that no longer looked mocking, only thoughtful. James Whiteham observed them for a moment before calmly returning to his conversation. In a room like this, that gesture mattered. Adrian led Sophie back onto the dance floor. This time, she stepped toward him without hesitation. The music carried them slowly through the room. And this dance felt different. The first had been uncertainty. This one felt like an answer. Sophie no longer scanned the room over his shoulder. Her hand rested steadily against him. The tension she carried had eased. Not vanished, but lightened. Around them, the room slowly adjusted. Victoria Lang looked away first. Megan Hart drifted toward. Another conversation. Two younger associates exchanged thoughtful glances, as though reconsidering their own silence. Even Marcus gave Adrian a slight nod that looked suspiciously close to respect. Near the end of the song, Sophie spoke quietly. I owe you an apology. For what? For assuming the worst of you. Adrian almost smiled. You weren't wrong to assume it, he said. You were only wrong about me specifically. For the first time all evening, Sophie laughed. Softly, tiredly, but genuinely. The quartet finished the song. Other couples drifted away from the floor. Adrian stepped back slowly, letting his hand fall from her waist. But Sophie did not move away from him. She remained standing beside him beneath the chandeliers, visible at the center of a room that had failed to erase her. They did not stay much longer after that. There was no need. The point had already been made. Adrian retrieved her coat himself instead of sending a waiter. He helped her into it with the same quiet care he gave everything else in his life. At the elevator, James Whiteham caught Adrian's eye across the ballroom. Adrian gave a single measured nod. James returned it slowly. Nothing more needed to be said. The elevator doors closed behind them. Inside the mirrored silence, neither of them rushed to speak. Finally, Sophie glanced toward him. I'm not going to thank you, she said. I wasn't expecting you to. I just wanted you to know. Noted. When the elevator reached the lobby, cool autumn air drifted through the open doors beyond the entrance. They stepped outside together onto the stone steps of Whitman Tower. At the curb, a black car waited beneath the streetlights. Sophie turned toward him. Without the chandeliers above her, she looked younger somehow. Less guarded. I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like, she admitted. Neither do I, Adrian said. But I'd like to find out somewhere without chandeliers. A small touch.